Hey there, I'm John Hayes, and thanks for joining us for this episode of the Founders Trust Podcast. Today, we're discussing how founders can build their personal brands through social media and integrate them into the fabric of their overall company brand. I spoke with George and Sami Jarjour, the founders of Sports on Tap, a national sports media company. George, Sami, and I discussed their company's origin story, coming from an entrepreneurial family who immigrated from Syria, and how they're tying that legacy of entrepreneurship and brotherhood into their personal brands. This episode was authentic, honest, and just a blast to record, and I'm so grateful to share the brother story with you today. So let's jump right in. Today's Startup Spotlight is brought to you by Savier. Savier takes a personalized approach to helping entrepreneurs create a clear path to growth. Through knowledge, coaching, and marketing services, Savier helps entrepreneurs and small business owners apply marketing to achieve their business goals. At Savier, our goal is to empower entrepreneurs to achieve marketing success. Check them out at Savier, that's savvyeur.com today. George, Sami, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Founders Trust Podcast. Really excited to have you guys on. Honestly, not only are we great friends, but you're some of my favorite entrepreneurs, and just having gotten to work with you on the Sports on Tap mission over the past year, I can't believe it's already been a year we've been working together on that, has been such an awesome experience. And I've already felt like I've learned so much from you guys. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today.
Thanks for having us. It's always funny, man. When you're with your brother and people you work with, everyone's waiting for the other person to answer that one. We're glad as well, man. There was a long pause there. That was not internet connection this time, but thanks for having us on.
Absolutely.
I will say second attempt on this podcast because George and I's internet was not doing so hot last time, but I think we're in the clear this time.
Sammy, my
George's internet.
You were just happened to be next to me, and it was not. Sammy has zero fault on this last episode. It's all me.
Well, I think we're ready to rock and roll this time, fellas. So let's hop right in. But honestly, just tell our listeners why you started Sports on Tap. I feel like I know bits and pieces of the story, but I'm not sure if I know the whole thing. And it's such a great company that you've built, and I know it has a great origin story. So would you mind sharing that with our listeners?
Yeah. Definitely.
George, you're good at prefacing it because it is I think John caught bits and pieces of the story that he surprisingly didn't know last time, but this time we'll give the full story. But George, if you want to preface it, I can come in at the end with the couple of.
I'll throw the fastball down the middle. You just hit it out of the park, bro. Maybe this should be like on our website, like that about us. Just have this story be like what the Sports on Tap is all about, right? So, the Sports on Tap SONT originally started as we, previously told John on a podcast that unfortunately did not get saved or the internet was really bad, but we'll try to tell it as off the cusp as last time. We originally started, so we came up with this idea. All right, Facebook now has Facebook Live, and this looks like it's really cool. And my dad had As Seen on TV stores when I was growing up, which for those who don't know what As Seen on TV is, it's like the magic sweeper, buy now, $19.99, buy one, get one free, only available now. But my dad's like, well, why don't we make it available in stores? So my dad, made partnerships with all these companies and had stores around the country. And now
best example is a Magic Bullet. That's my favorite.
Magic Bullet. There we go.
Got one in my kitchen, guys.
So do I.
Probably
everyone still has a Magic Bullet.
Magic Bullet is damn awesome. That's why. So my dad did that. The internet came about, and retail stores in malls were not what they used to be. So me and Sami, being his son, we're entrepreneurs too. We secured some financing from a really good family friend who's done a lot of business with my dad before. And we decided to build SONT, the first ever home shopping network on Facebook Live. And it sounds like a great idea, right? I mean, we went to all these trade shows, we made partnerships. We had this deal where, we would sell it for them. They'd ship directly to the customer, drop shipping, but at a huge discount because it was like a home shopping network type of deal. We hired a bunch of I wouldn't call them actors, but like presenters, hosts. We hired a graphic designer. We had a secretary, a lady. Like we raised some good money on it, and we were ready to roll. 2 days, John. 2 days into launching our, and we were supposed to get another large sum of money to keep it afloat after the startup costs, and building a studio with a kitchen and everything. I mean, we went through the nines to get this going. He had some financial trouble that we did not really know about, and he backed out 2 days after launch. So we were stuck with his studio, stuck with hosts, and we had to make that uncomfortable emergency meeting where we we let everyone go because we had no money to pay them. And me and Sammy were like, all right.
We essentially fired everyone, yes.
We let them go.
Same difference.
I like to say fire when someone does something wrong, right? They didn't do nothing wrong. They should have fired our ass at that point. So me and Sammy were like, all right, cool. Well, we have all this product. Why don't we record something? So before the Sports on Tap, we started recording, and I'll let Sammy go from here.
Well, we started recording these damn shows, and I'm not a big fan of playing with products and doing these different things. I love the whole concept of, the home shopping network. Cool idea. But when I went on camera and was like, I'm showing these products now, we were just doing the whole do whatever we can it'd be like a restaurant shutting down and we're not chefs, but we're like, I guess we'll cook the food. Right. So we started presenting these products and doing these shows. And I looked at George one day and I was like, I can't do this. Like I was playing with glitter on air and I don't know, we were doing Bluetooth mics and we're doing these these hour-long shows. And I was like, I literally can't do this much longer. I'd rather go get a job. So I eventually went to George and I was like, I got to do something that we like. And simply enough, as simple as it gets, I looked at him. I was like, I don't know what the hell we're going to do. But we have mics, cameras. Let's do something sports related. And George was like, okay, I guess we can do that. There was a tiny bit of pushback, but not much, because I think George also hated hosting shows playing with glitter.
And I also had no choice, dude. We had nothing going. I can't sell glitter.
Yeah. So I said, let's do sports. And we did. And so we just started putting on some sports shows, talking. We'd have our friends come over and just talk sports. And we were like, oh, we'll just find a way to make this work. And I don't know. I don't even know how it came about, but we took the SONT and we're like, well, Sports on Tap, that works. And that's a good abbreviation. And we kind of just rolled with the punches. And then, as time went, we started off, we didn't have a website. We were just doing Facebook Live shows. And we actually got a couple ad sponsorships on our show for a little bit. And then we're like, maybe we'll open a website and maybe we can start doing some more on social media. And slowly but surely we were like, hey, maybe we can actually build this into a real business. And, I was doing a lot of the side hustle shit, as George knows. I was doing Uber Eats and Amazon Flex stuff and just trying to make money on the side to keep it rolling. And we all figured out eventually how to make it work enough. And it was a sports company.
Yeah, and I'm actually trying on Google right now. I wonder if I type. I think there could be some stuff still. If you type in Sant home shopping, nothing yet. But I know a while back I used to type in SONT, and you would get home shopping and pictures of me and Sammy with glitter and shit. But it looks like it's not on Google anymore. So that's always positive when that stuff finally is off Google. So I guess what they say about it's always on Google forever is a lie, because it's not on Google anymore. So can't find me with glitter on my face.
I mean, guys, it's crazy because I've known you for years now, and I never knew that Sports on Tap came out of as seen on TV as a Facebook Live home shopping network platform. I had no idea. If that's not the ultimate story of entrepreneurs pivoting, I'm not sure what is. I mean, going from selling glitter and NutriBullets on Facebook to becoming a sports media company that's now expanded into multiple cities. It's just an incredible story. And I appreciate you guys sharing that, because I think a lot of times, we interview a lot of early stage founders who are going through building their ideas and building their companies. And it's tough. It's a roller coaster. And just to hear your story of perseverance and taking something that you would start off with, you had so much traction, you had hired a team, you had financial backing, having it really fall apart in a short span, and then taking that and turning it into something really positive that you love doing and you've really succeeded at, I think is, in my mind, the ultimate story of entrepreneurial success, regardless of wherever Sports on Tap goes. It's just that resilience and that understanding of, here's what we got, here's what we know how to do, here's what we like doing, and you go out and make it happen. So that really, guys, is awesome. You know, over the last 5-10 years, we've seen a big shift in sports media towards opinion-based content. So it's not necessarily like the ESPN model of breaking news, updating trades, etc. Where does Sports on Tap in your guys' minds fit into that landscape of sports media, and what really differentiates the brand for you in terms of what the company brings to the market?
Well, you made a really good point there about like sports has shifted into opinionation business and not into breaking news business model. And I think there's a reason for that. One, I feel like now, so you know, you're young, right? And I'm young, and we've all grew up during the time of Sports Center. We all grew up in the time where we weren't able to access highlights instantly on our phone. We grew up in a time where it was like, all right, 9 o'clock Sports Center coming up. I wonder if the Seattle Mariners won today because I missed the game. I wonder if Griffey hit a home run. And I wonder what the best highlights of the day are so far. And holy shit, Randy Johnson got traded. Like, this is me when I was like a kid. Fast forward till now, we don't have to wait. That's why Sports Center is struggling. That's why ESPN's struggling, because everything is so instant, right? So I think the only thing that you can always be surprised by is opinion business. That's why podcasts work. That's why videos work. That's why websites with opinions and analysis work. And that's why breaking news doesn't necessarily work. Now, there's a place for breaking news, right? You want to know the news, but it's like a race to say who's first. Source: ESPN reports that Adrian Wojnarowski said that LeBron James is signing with the Lakers. Then 55 different websites tweeted it. Do you really need a website to click in an article about it? Probably not. Do you need to turn on SportsCenter to read about it? Probably not. But do you want someone's opinion that might be a little different about it? Yes. So I think, like, personality-wise, I think it was a shift that maybe necessarily wasn't even planned. I think it just happened, right? Because what kind of content can you put out there other than opinion-based content that can really move the needle these days?
Yeah, I think the whole key is the personality base, because the breaking news is still important, I guess, right? So it's like one way of saying the breaking news isn't important, but it still is. And because it is, but it's the way that the breaking news is being given to you, right? Or how you're being told about this breaking news. So I think that's where the interesting in between is, that it's not necessarily that the breaking news doesn't matter, that everybody's posting about the breaking news, because we still want to be part of that breaking news, but just in a different way, right? And that's where I think it's kind of important, or saying something funny about it, saying something intriguing about it, even saying something as simple, today there was a Dak Prescott signing with the Cowboys. I tried to tweet out something about the contracts, how he is one of the 4 highest paid quarterbacks, and here's a breakdown of that. Rather than, like, to me, that might be more interesting than another post that just says he signed with the Cowboys. So there's a new way to distribute it. And then later, I know I put out a little video on Twitter and on TikTok and Instagram, and I know George did as well. And then mix in the opinions, right? And I think that at least gives you some chance for people to see you as an opinion-based guy, maybe see you as, they at least put out some interesting things about the contracts or interesting things about NFL quarterbacks when quarterback news breaks, and they put out opinions, rather than, if you go to the feed right now, it's just a photo of Dak Prescott that says breaking news, Dak Prescott signed with the Cowboys, because that will be too similar to everybody else. So I think there's a fine mix of how the breaking news doesn't matter as much anymore, because you don't want to be just breaking news, but it still matters. It just matters how you distribute it.
Absolutely, Sammy. That's a terrific point. And as you touched on, when it comes to really that entertainment or opinion aspect of sports media, it's inherently personality driven, right? It's inherently how someone's delivering it, or the framework or the perspective that they bring to the news, and whether they think the Dak Prescott signing is a good thing or a bad thing, or whatever it may be. So how have you guys individually thought about incorporating your personalities into your content? And then as an extension, how does that fit into the larger picture of the brand you want to build with Sports on Tap?
Yeah. Sam, you want to go first on this one?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And I think we talked about this when we first tried this recording, but of course, as we said, George's internet was giving us some problems, but we talked about how to mix in personalities.
On it every little bit, man. I mean, come on.
The Wi-Fi ruined my first original thought on this, but it's hard because building personality within a company or within just your on social media, whatever, is hard, right? And mixing it in with your business is hard sometimes. And I guess this is something I talk about a lot with George. I talk about this a lot with whoever I talk about with social media. Building a brand is really hard if you're basing it just on personalities as well. And the reason behind that is if you go to our main page, the Sports on Tap, and all you saw on there was, me talking as the picture's going down, it's not really right now. It's not giving anybody value to go there, right? Because if they don't know me, why are they going to go there? Now so this is where it gets hard, where you're trying to put yourself out there, build personalities for a brand, but you also still have to incorporate the original stuff of just like memes and building funny content of some sort, because you're trying to build this presence online, but you also need to make sure you're still giving enough value to give them a reason to see that person, right? Like,
absolutely.
We get a lot of traffic on this page. Well, let's check out who runs these pages. It's much more likely than I'm just posting only stuff that's just me. And, the likelihood of somebody just coming across that is a lot harder. And in general, building a brand with, building a personal brand within your brand is just never the easiest thing because of, this is how I say it, at least because of, trying to be authentic and trying to give value and trying to, I don't know, there's just on and off. And it's hard sometimes in life. There's going to be some videos that flop or some podcasts that flop and some that do well. And you always got to find a way to find that good mix of the content, what's doing well, what's not doing well, being your authentic self, all those different things. So I think it's a really interesting field to be in because I feel like every day I'm trying to figure out how to just continue to be more natural. George and I have a lot of plans on the business that we'll share with you at some point here too, about how to get out there and do more stuff on like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter Live on a daily basis. Just be out there more often, because I think the more you go out there, the more you become fully your authentic self online. I think it's really easy while building a brand online to feel like you're being authentic. But then like when you look back, it's like George and I will look back some of our old podcasts or old videos, and I can see a huge change from when we first started talking on podcasts and it was awkward and the pauses and we don't know what's going on. And we're both feels nervous. So I think it's really cool to see the progression. And the more you do things personal brand wise, the more you're going to just like look at yourself and be like, wow, now I'm really just authentic and it looks cool and it sounds cool. And it's a better chance people are going to follow you. People can sense too when you're authentic and when you're not. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And one thing I think is really important to keep in mind, and I think me and Sam have struggled with this and come back to it and struggled and come back. And I think we're almost going to we're almost at hitting a sweet spot with it, is being widely available to be online, right? So we used to do a daily show on Facebook Live every single day and record it into a podcast and post it. And we were like, okay, maybe we're putting out too much content. So, I mean, one thing we were talking about now is doing a live every single day from 4 to like 4:30, let's just say, called the Sports on Tap Happy Hour. And it's not going to be a podcast. It's just something to put yourself out there, right? So the way I kind of look at things is, okay, Colin Cowherd, for example, is a good example, or even Clay Travis, who some people like and some people don't like. But why are they well known? Well, one, they're around every single day. Like if you're Fox News or Fox,
for so many hours,
so people they're always on. They're always available. So yeah, maybe you're not watching them at the time they're available, but when you're like, all right, I want to listen to a sports podcast. Oh yeah, Colin Cowherd has one. Oh, I want to listen to sports. Oh yeah, Clay Travis has one. You need to be in people's mind. that doesn't necessarily mean every piece of your content needs to be consumed by a mass amount of people, but you want to be in people's mind when they're looking for sports content. You want them to remember the sports on tap. You want them to remember Sammy on tap, George on tap, Son Chicago. Like, you just want to get that into their mind that this person, when I'm looking for sports content, has sports content available. If you're not in their mind when that happens, you're not going to win.
George, that's a really interesting point on being top of mind, because I think that's very inherently tied in with how your authentic personality, or Sammy's authentic personality, connects with someone, and why someone would keep you top of mind, or why you would resonate. And that's very much about the personal brand that each of you has built with your respective following. So if you were to describe what you think that personal brand is, and maybe just a couple words, maybe it's 2 or 3 keywords that you think really define what your personal brand is, or how it's perceived, and what you want that to be, how would you describe what you think your personal brand is, and why your followers stick with you and why it resonates with them?
I think for mine, I'm quirky. To be honest with you, I have some weird thoughts, and I think weird things that most people probably don't think and don't really necessarily completely believe. But I think I completely believe it. I don't really say anything I don't believe. And I think sometimes people are like, is this guy full of shit or not? But I'm really not. I actually believe it in most of the things I say. Like Carson Wentz, I think, was in my QB power rankings at number 9 for like half the season. And I still, like, next year, he'll probably start out at number 10 because he went down in my mind a little bit.
He calls it quirky. I call it delusional, but it's one and the same. He still thinks Andrew Luck's going to win 2 Super Bowls as well.
If he came back, he would, but he isn't. So Carson Wentz will win those 2 Super Bowls for him.
Well, now that's possible. One word I'll use is Seattle, which is the reason I use that is because I know a lot of people that follow us on social media will have a good association with the Seattle sports teams.
Yeah.
I know we have really good following on our Seattle-based stuff. And they probably, if somebody was thinking of like Seattle sports, I know there's some people that probably think, well, I'm hoping at least, would probably think of me like, oh, I've watched this guy talk about Seattle sports a lot or tweet about Seattle sports a lot. I think one thing for George and I also that we're really trying to work on and continue to do is use the advantage of being brothers in the sports business. I think that's one thing that we've really, and that's like a key word for me is brothers, because we're trying to build, this brand and help it parlay it into, keep continuing to build the sports on tap. And I think brothers is a really cool thing that we're not only just brothers on a podcast together, but business owners, and, like family business, trying to grow that. And I don't think there's really anything like that in the industry. Like, I think it'd be cool that we're 2 brothers with a podcast and we're trying to incorporate brother stuff into the or sibling stuff into our podcast. For example, we're doing this new segment at the end of every podcast. You can leave a voicemail on Anchor where we record our podcast. We're asking people to record their best sibling stories or sibling sports stories, whatever it may be, and throw that at the end of every podcast, because we kind of want to parlay the fact that, parlay it into something bigger. Like, we are like the brothers in sports. There's not that many of them. There's some of them on the football field and, some in the NBA, but I don't feel like there's any of that in the podcasting game. So I think I think that's 2 big things is the local sports. And when I say Chicago, that could also mean, I said Seattle, that could also mean Chicago, like building those local brands is big for the business. I think the brother aspect is something that can be really beneficial for us and for the whole brand going forward long-term.
That's interesting, Sammy, because I certainly, in viewing your content and interacting with you guys, I know how close you are and how the brothers and family aspect has played up on perhaps the logistics or business side. And I think having given it a little bit more thought now that you said that, it certainly makes both of you more relatable, because people have siblings, people have family members that they talk about the Seahawks game with, or they talk about tennis with, or whatever it may be. And sports is such a unifying thing for many people, or even just a topic of conversation among strangers, that the aspect of brothers or having someone to share sports with, I think is very powerful for the brand that you build, whether it's you're on a podcast together or whether you're tweeting at one another, whatever it may be. So that's an interesting point, because you don't often, you hear about family brands, but you don't necessarily hear about them in terms of the individuals within that family, which I think is a really compelling way to differentiate your brand. And one thing you touched on, Sammy, is being your authentic self, and obviously being brothers, your authentic brother. It's not a fake family by any means, but social media.
I promise we're not just pretending. We're not stick. We are brothers.
They are in fact brothers. We can confirm, but.
Well, we just maybe, I don't know if we have to take a DNA test. We're gonna have to have it's totally true, but I think so. I don't think anyone made any mistakes.
We'll follow up. We'll confirm on a later episode whether Jordan and Sammy are in fact related blood relatives.
But, we will be on the Maury show next Tuesday, finding out if we're real brothers or.
And I think one thing that comes with social media is that there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of negativity and haters and critics. That's especially true with sports media when people are passionate and fired up about their teams. So how do you stay true to what your authentic personal brand is while being able to sift through or ignore or cut through that noise and sometimes negativity that comes with putting yourself out there on social media platforms?
It's very simple for me. So this is going to be a really short answer, but I really believe it. When someone is negative and doesn't like you, they leave a comment and they interact with you. Someone likes you, what you say, they either just click like or retweet and move on. You need the haters. You need the negativity to actually move the needle a little bit, because most of the time, if someone agrees with you, usually it's just as simple as click like, click retweet, move on. I actually think it's good. I think I like, because it's not politics, right? If this is politics, it'd suck because like you actually argue about stuff that matters. But like today, I posted something about Russell Westbrook's MVP being a gimmick, and people were fucking fired up, and I'm like, oh great, cool. They're all so mad about it. It's Russell Westbrook and it's a triple double. Does it really matter in the grand scheme of life? No. So it did, like, I guess if this was real life, it'd be really hard, because I think it's really hard, like when you're talking about really serious stuff like the war or COVID or I don't know, something that's really important. This is sports. It's fun. Like, someone disagrees with you about sports, it's super easy for me to move off of it. And it's like, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna expand on that, because I think for us, it's actually very easy, like George said, to say it doesn't matter, right? Because it doesn't. Like for us with sports, it's really easy for me not to care if somebody calls me an idiot, because of like, I think, like same thing with he's talking about, like he calls what Russell Westbrook's MVP a gimmick. I call Derrick Rose's MVP a gimmick. Like, so we both
on a podcast hosted by a guy from Chicago and say that. Come on, man. Like,
my point exactly is that, but it's sports, right? So it's like, whatever. If you're like, damn, you're an idiot, I'd be like, maybe you think I'm an idiot about sports. No big deal. Right now, I do know it's important for other industries and other people, right? If you're like somebody out there in fitness, you're a woman posting pictures and people are, saying mean things. Mm-hmm. It's a whole nother level of like the bad side of the internet, right? So that I understand. I just think for us, it's really easy because it is sports and it is just the reality of like, some people are gonna be like, oh, your sports takes are stupid. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, like, I don't know. Like when I think this team's going to win, like, well, I think this one, like, okay, we'll find out in 6 months. So I don't know. Like, it's just an opinion, but I do think that, I do think, like you said, though, it can be a nasty place. So I do feel for those that are more in industries or just in the personal world of getting mean hate, because there are some parts of social media where you can get some hate that actually really, does mess with you. For me, the harder part on social media, I guess, just to like add to that conversation of what's hard on social media, for me, just comes from the point of like continually trying to put stuff out there. And sometimes, we've talked about, sometimes you don't get much engagement or much interaction on something, and it makes you lag for 2-3 days because you're like, whatever, does anybody care? Does this or that? And I think one of the most cliche things that I've learned, and it's an extreme cliche, but it's so real, is the whole concept, if one person likes it, right? Maybe you're actually entertaining somebody, that one person for a day that you don't know, then it is kind of worth it. So I think it's just like that hard thing in social media for me, not the negativity. It's more the like to keep yourself mentally like in it, where you're like, hey, there is somebody out there that does listen or somebody that does care. And, I still think that's something that matters to all people, whether you have 5 followers or like 20,000 on social media. It's like, I know everybody that has a following on social media still is like, does somebody care that much about this post? So one thing that I think is big on social media is to just post what you want to post, do it the way you want to do it, and be happy with it. Because at the end of the day, I think we need to go back to that place where like, I'm being your authentic self. And I think that's the hard part of social media is people aren't authentic because of the negativity or because of the lack of like, participation on some of your posts and all this. So I think that's the real negativity is what it does to some people where it's like, oh, does anybody care or not? And I think that's the tough part.
That's a terrific point, Sammy. It gets into that mental game of, are you posting for the engagement, or are you posting because it's content that you authentically want to produce, right? And that becomes a conflict within your creative process of, am I just posting stuff that I think is going to do well, or am I posting stuff that's genuine to what I believe, genuine to what I want to share, genuine to the value I want to create for people? And admittedly, sometimes episodes of this podcast itself do very well. Sometimes they don't do well at all. And it's not for lack of effort. It's not because the guest quality isn't high or the conversation isn't good. Sometimes it just doesn't resonate for whatever reason. And that is a mental game of, how do I continue improving and getting better and making sure the content I'm producing is still of a high quality?
Absolutely.
And maybe there are adjustments that need to be made, but how do I make sure that I'm not just doing it for the engagement or for the number of likes, or just
it's like the
pure simplicity of the satisfaction of seeing the number of engagement go up, right?
At the end of the day, a lot of times people post this stuff to get engagement, thinking that's going to help them grow what they're trying to do on a higher level. But really, they might be just hurting themselves in the future, because when you go out and try to put up stuff that you really care about and what you really want to build, no one is, engaging with it, because the whole following you built is based on something else, right? So you want to build your following based on whether that following is 1,000 people or 25,000 people. I think 1,000 people engaged in the stuff that you care about and you really think is important is better than 25,000 people who don't care.
Yeah. I also think there's I have a little counter to something John said, actually. So my little counter, it's a little one. It's not that big. My one little counter too sometimes is over worrying about quality as well, because I've put myself in the mistake sometimes of over worrying about, what does this camera look like? What is what does everything look like around me? And I don't post anything that day, right? Where I've realized okay, if I have the time to make it look more high quality today and I feel like doing it, do it. It doesn't hurt, obviously. Actually, it's probably better, right? But at the same time, if there's a day where I'm on the go and I didn't have time at my desk today, but I can still whip out my phone in 2021, record something, put a little background on it, and put it out there. And I think that's one big thing that goes into this conversation too, is it's almost having more of the screw it mentality with everything, right? Where it's let's not worry about what people think. Let's not worry about what I always look like. Let's not always worry about is this the best piece of content I've ever put out? Because maybe it's not, but maybe it's pretty good. Or maybe the one that you thought wasn't that good actually does well. So I think what's interesting, I agree that yes, it's better to make good content when you can. But at the same time, it's this is where don't let yourself overthink what is good content, right? Do what makes you happy, do it the way you want to do it for that day. And put out, the more content you put out, the better chance that it's going to go well. So I always use this example for myself because I go through the same struggles like everybody else, where it's, if I posted 7 days a week, once a day, with average quality, camera or whatever, but it's me being authentic, it has a better chance of growing than posting once every 14 days where I spend a lot of time editing a video or doing whatever it may be. So I think there's always that fine line between consistency and quality and being authentic and whatever it may be.
Well, I'm right there with you on that point, Sammy. I will raise my hand and say I'm guilty of trying to perfect my content. And it doesn't come from a place of, it just comes from a place of caring and wanting to put out a really high quality product. But at the same time, you do have to force yourself to remember that old startup adage of learn fast, fail fast, just keep testing things, just keep throwing things out there, see what sticks. And at some point you have to take a look at the results and say, okay, these 3 things did really well. These 3 things didn't. So we're going to scrap these and we're not going to do these other ones. But at the same time, it's that constant iterative process, especially in the world of media, sports media, social media, where there are always new platforms or always new features. Maybe it's TikTok, Instagram Reels, Twitch, whatever it is, there's always something to test. And there's always a different assumption that you want to throw out there and see if it sticks or not. And that's really where the consistency comes into play with the content. And honestly, guys, I'm not just saying this because you're guests on the show, but when I think of consistency in terms of producing content, I immediately think of both of you. And that's before we even started working together over the past year, just because I follow you guys. And I remember back in the day when you used to do the Facebook Live shows and you were doing multiple Facebook Live shows a day. And I remember sitting down and saying to a friend, this is so impressive. I don't know how they find the time to do this, because there were multiple shows, multiple hour shows, and you guys were just cranking through them. But the biggest thing is there was something out there every day. And I've seen you carry that through to Twitter, into Instagram, and to these other platforms, whether it's podcasts or it's just posts, whatever it may be. So what's your secret to the consistency? Because when it comes down to it, the people who execute are the ones that get paid. That's the best piece of advice I've ever gotten in my professional career. And consistency is a huge piece of that. So how do you guys approach that to build a brand in a consistent way and do so at a high level while enjoying it? Because those are a couple different pieces to it that are really difficult to achieve and mix together.
Right.
Pick me to start really quick. All right. Here's what I want to say about that. Is one thing is, first of all, appreciate the compliment. Number one. Number two is, I think this is where George and I have gone back and forth a lot, trying to find some more of that consistency again. I feel like we swayed off a little bit here and there sometimes. And for example, I think one thing is to continually make sure you're doing something that you enjoy, right? And now I think where George and I made a little bit of a mistake, despite it being so consistent, is when we were doing like 3 hours, 4 hours a day on lives, it would start to get to a point where, it reminds me of cable television, where we're out of things to talk about. We're making up topics. You're trying to do like First Take, Stephen A. Smith, just making up topics. Now we're trying to get back to this point of consistency where we're doing, for example, Sports on Tap happy hour. We're going to be starting that next week at 4:00. Go in for 30 minutes and do things you enjoy. If it's, we continue to talk about this, where if it's 15 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, if it's an hour that day, just go do it. If there's an off topic thing that's not sports, but something was breaking on Twitter and it's fun to talk about, go for it. And then I think the big thing there is we continue to talk about, we're brothers, right? Be brothers. If he says something that's annoying, I'm going to tell him that was annoying. Like, you move on. Like, we're actually, and we found that going back, we're trying to get back to that authentic, do what you love, all those things roots, where it's like, be brothers, have fun, and do what you like. And then I think when you're doing those things, consistency becomes easy, because, if we go on for 30 minutes to an hour a day, actually talking about topics we enjoy, interacting with people, I think the consistency is easy because it's going to be fun. Now, I think if what we were doing before might have been a little too much for us, where it like dried up the consistency, but now going back to it, we're going to find like a good medium of how to do it while enjoying it, keeping it time reasonable, not making up content just to make up content, and just doing it for the fun of it. And I think it's so cliche, but when you're doing things you like and it's fun, it really, really works. And it's really easy to do.
I think one thing that's really important, to just piggyback off everything Sami said, which was spot on, is it's hard to continue to be consistent if you are overreaching for it, right? So, for example, with us, we were doing the Facebook Live show every day, producing it into a podcast, producing it into an article, and then posting it everywhere, and trying to do social media while writing articles. Like, all right, that's not going to work. So now we're pivoting to this happy hour thing, which is the non-podcast. Like, if you like us on the podcast, you can find us on live every day. If you found us on live, you know we have a podcast. Like, so you got to do things where you're like, okay, I want to remain consistent, but how do I not overextend myself to where the quality is bad and it's no longer fun, right? Because like if it becomes something becomes a burden, it becomes hard. So it's about finding like that balance of, all right, how do I do this without overextending myself? And if you can find that balance, you're always going to be able to achieve consistency, in my opinion.
Terrific points, guys. Anytime you're having fun doing it, it doesn't feel like work, right?
Right.
And one thing that I think often gets difficult when it comes to blogs or especially sports media, because there are a lot of people who do start sports media sites or blogs, social media accounts, etc. But one thing that starts taking away from the fun of it is when it starts to feel more like a business. And
Right.
when you're doing something and you're not necessarily seeing the results, or because it's difficult to monetize, it's a difficult industry anytime you do a blog or a sports media site. And we saw with Barstool, it took nearly a decade before they were eventually acquired by Penn Gaming. So how do you go about staying resilient, staying consistent, and building your company when you know that it takes a certain amount of time to really hit it big, even with no guarantees of ever doing so, just as there are with any startup company?
Belief, I guess. Like, you know what the end game is, you know what the end goal is, and shoot, I guess sometimes you're so like deep into it, you don't even think about it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
You keep going.
you just keep going. You don't really think about like this harder times. You just like, all right, well, this is where we're going. We're gonna keep going at it, and you just hope. Like, I guess sometimes you have to be naive enough and be like, literally, you have to be built from a different. You know it, John. You're an entrepreneur. You gotta be built differently to be an entrepreneur. You don't really think of this stuff when you're going like, this is a great idea. I'm going for it. How do you make money? Figure it out. That's kind of just how it goes.
Yeah, hopefully I do. That's how. Yeah, I think cliche. Okay, this is actually why I like cliches a lot, because like a lot of cliches have come true for me, where it's almost like everything about just like cliches when it came to social media or like your positivity or all these like, how do you not quit? Oh, you just stay resilient. You've always found out that it could be worse. And like, they're all true actually. So it's like, they're cliches, but they're pretty real where, I've been in better situations and I've been in worse. And then you always know like every skill that I'm doing is leading to something. And if it ever leads to a complete failure, I have all these skills. I can use it at a job. I can use it building something else one day, or it's just going to lead to working. So it's like, I found this, oh God, I saw this quote today and I wish I wrote it down, and it had something to do with like, do you ever realize that you spent all those years thinking about like, oh, I'm going to be here in 5 years, and now you're here and you're thinking about those 5 years again, right? Like where you're going to be in 5 years. And then it like made me kind of think, that's why we always get like anxious, or people get worried about, oh, where's my business going to go? Because we're always like in a moment and worried about 5 years from now, like, where's this business going to be? How are we going to make the money? How am I going to pay this? How am I going to buy a house? Where in reality, as cliche as it is, if you just like live in the moment and do what you're liking, I think like you slowly build, right? You slowly get to the points you want to get to. And I will say this for any entrepreneur listening to this podcast, or anybody that wants to be a future entrepreneur, I literally had this conversation with my girlfriend recently. She's graduating from with a health and wellness degree, and she doesn't know if she wants to start her own business or go get a job or whatever. And I'm like, at the end of the day, nowadays, especially nowadays, it's 2021. You can find ways to make money online, like small gigs. You can find ways to do Uber and people, or go get part-time jobs and work at night for your business. All those cliches are so real now, where it's like you can grind on one thing and find a way on the other thing. All of us here in this conversation, I think a lot of entrepreneurs that would listen to this podcast or have been on this podcast, I think they all probably have something in common, which is we all kind of just figure it out as we go. And I think you got to find a way. And I think that's what George was saying too. Like, I don't know, you got to be delusional. You find a way.
Yeah. Well said, Sammy. Just I guess it goes back to my podcast authenticity. I'm delusional. So it's pretty easy for me. I guess sometimes you just turn off your brain. You turn off the part of your brain that says you should worry.
And sometimes you don't have time to worry, and sometimes you're just so engrossed in it, George, as you said, that you just stay the course. And Sammy, you touched on a great point that sometimes you just inherently get so worked up or so worried about what the future holds. And it's natural. It's a human thing, right? To be concerned about where you're going to be. And maybe it just comes back to that basic knack of survival. I'm not quite sure, but really you have to execute today to be successful tomorrow, and you have to build over time. And it's easy to get lost in the worries of the future that prevent you from taking step A today and step B tomorrow. And by the end of the week, you've done 7 steps and you're that much closer. So I think that's a terrific point. And guys, as we head into our 3-question grand finale here, I think it's,
I like this already.
I just want to say thank you for helping provide appropriate perspective, because for founders, it can be really tough to sometimes lose sight of the big picture when we're in the weeds on things. So I appreciate the perspective you brought together on all of this. But
can I make one comment before the 3 questions? And I think this is actually a big point to this whole conversation. I think George will agree. Is one thing that, because we mentioned Sant and how we started off as, like from my dad's business and all these things, and we talk about entrepreneurs. I think George and I neglected one thing, and I have to say it before we get to the finale, which is our family's background, because I think that plays a huge role. Not only was our dad an entrepreneur, but my dad literally looks me in the eyes so many times where if I'm having a bad day or I'm struggling with stuff. Our dad immigrated here from Syria at 33, I believe it was, right, George?
Around that time.
At 33 years old, and George was, one of the babies he immigrated with.
Immigrating? Come on now.
So the whole family immigrated here. My dad was 33. They didn't have much money. He didn't even speak good English. Neither did my mom. And they came and figured it out. They put money towards a restaurant, built that, then put money towards another restaurant, built that, and then put money towards that scene on TV stores, and just figured it out as they go. And I think, every time somebody asks me about do you stress about this? I always kind of related back to my dad. If he could do it, 33 years old, not speaking English, with not a lot of money, with a kid and a wife, coming to America from Syria, we all have the opportunity. I think, as George knows, one big thing that we've learned, the reason I think I love Sports on Tap, and I love that it's related back to our father's business in the name, is because of that journey. And I always think if and this is almost going to delusional, we have to make it work, because if he was able to make it work, we have to make it work too. Yeah, so it's that's where it always comes from. So that was my closing statement that I wanted to mention at the beginning that I forgot.
That's terrific, guys. And again, I hate to use the cliche, but it really is the American dream. It's taking something, just finding your way. There is no blueprint. There is just really faith and belief in yourself that you'll figure it out. And that's ultimately what anyone building a startup is really doing. And I'm glad that we've been able to share your story about that today, because it's really powerful, and it's something that keeps you going when there are setbacks, or keeps you going when there are things that don't go your way, or when you're selling glitter and hating it, right, Sammy?
Oh yeah, no more glitter for me.
All right, guys. Well, let's kick off our 3-question grand finale here. For each of you, what's been your favorite moment working with Sports on Tap so far?
Favorite moment, George? Can you mute yourself next time? My goodness,
this
is that brother.
Oh wow, favorite moment. That's a good question.
Favorite moment.
I mean, I guess what I thought it was really
a question.
That sorry, so it's not I felt our first time we interviewed Enes Kanter, and I thought that was kind of cool, because it was our first time with a big time NBA star. So I kind of felt oh cool, we're legit. It was more, it wasn't just the interview. He's a great guy and all that, and I wasn't the world's most captivating podcast or anything like that, or even our best podcast. It was a good podcast, don't get me wrong, he's a great guest. But it was just that moment oh, okay, cool. So we have some pull. If we reach out to this person or do that, someone is willing to speak to us because they see that we are a legitimate company. So it was just a really cool feeling.
That's a good one, actually. Yeah, that kind of gives you some like validity and makes you feel good in that sense. Let's see. For me, I'll say my favorite moment. Wow, that's such a good question. I'll say a cliche because I like cliches, which is like the first time we made $1, because I think we got our first. We were doing like Facebook Live shows, and we had a what ad company? It was like a sports betting company, the classic on sports podcast. MyBookie.ag, the classic sports betting podcast sponsorship, and we got paid for it. And I was like, I have no idea what the hell we did, but like we started talking sports on camera and we just got paid something. And I was like, that's pretty cool, because this was literally me being like, screw it, I'm not playing with my glitter and I'm going to talk about sports. And when you actually get paid for the first time, it gives you that first like, oh, like, you know, when you see people on YouTube doing things or on podcasts, like that's no joke. Like you actually, the more you grow it, the more you're going to make money off it. And the more you make your dream into kind of a reality. So I think that was cool.
Absolutely. There's something tremendously validating about that first $1 of revenue. And it's
it's really cool.
Companies put it in a frame and hang it on the wall. It's just, it's someone has believed in you or considered you credible enough to actually pay you for what you want to do. And that's a really powerful moment for any entrepreneur. So it's hard to beat that one. It's hard to beat either of those, honestly.
It is.
All right, guys. Number 2. In what ways have each of you personally grown the most through your experience working with Sports on Tap?
Personally grown. Okay. In what ways? I would say number 1 is growing I guess like I was going to say delusional, but that's George's word. But like, I've grown in the sense that I don't necessarily believe in failure anymore at all. I used to think failure. I used to actually think there was such thing as failure. Now I believe there's like, you can fail and then like, bounce back and get places. But I don't really believe in failure. Like, even if something doesn't go well, you don't fail anymore. Right. And I've kind of learned that, like, I've always realized now, I guess recently, that like, even if I'm doing something and I don't do well at it, usually my perception's much worse than what somebody else's is. So like, I'm not really failing. And I think that's where I've grown the most, is I've realized, hey, you know what, you might have good months, bad months, but you actually don't fail. Because if I failed, ultimately failing would mean I'm not doing it anymore or I quit. But like, I haven't done that. So I think it's kind of a mindset shift that I've worked on, where it's like always kind of like, you're not really failing. Like, you're doing this. There's a lot of people that would love to be in your situation. There's a lot of people that want to follow their dreams and haven't. So like, no part of me has failed. That's how I see it.
Yeah. And for me, I guess, is like, don't listen to a lot of critics in general, right? Like, most people are like, oh, you want to do this? Well, you didn't go to school for broadcasting or journalism or this. And I used to really believe in all that. Like, oh, you have to do this and this and this to get to, like, there's a path, right? You go point A to point B to point C. And now I kind of feel like, in general, you don't have to follow there's a reason they say off the beaten path, right? Like, sometimes you can do things without having to follow a blueprint that was put aside for you, because everyone has their own journey, and like, not just in like sports media, but in life. Some people get married at 31, some at 25, some have kids at 40. Like, just in general, blueprints in life don't mean shit. I guess is what I learned the most. And yeah, that's completely what I've learned the most.
I like that one, actually. I kind of really like that one, because I've learned the same thing. Because we all can have like, oh my God, my friend at 27's bought a house and he's married. And it's like, I'm 28. Like, what am I doing wrong? And it's like, actually, you could end up worse or better, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. Like, you don't have to follow their path. I like that one, George.
And it wouldn't be, to tie it all together, it wouldn't be authentic to you to follow someone else's path or to follow someone else's blueprint, right? Because that's not what you are. That's not what your personality is, or your goals. And so doing that would be inauthentic to you.
Exactly.
100%.
And then, like Carson Wentz being a top 10 quarterback next year is not the path that I thought he was going to take. He's going to get there, though. He'll be
He
on
will be there. Mark it
He
down.
will
Mark it
be
down.
my QB week 1, number 3. I'm kidding.
All right, guys. The grand finale question here. What's the one thing that Sports on Tap needs to take that next big step or reach that next big milestone? And that could be venture capital, that could be introduction to a key hire or connection to a strategic partner. What would that one ask be from you guys? And how can the Founders Trust community help Sports on Tap achieve that next big milestone?
That's a great question. I guess I'll go first. I think the one thing Sports on Tap needs would be, I don't even think it's necessarily funding. I think it is just one big, I don't even want to say break, right? But it's just like that one key listen, that one traction channel that just seems to just snap its finger and go. I don't think necessarily we're far away from it, but I think we're one key just traction channel, one roll of a tire away.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I feel like any of our podcasts, any of our content, I feel like we're one big, one viral moment away. And that sounds crazy, I know, to most people, but we've had our viral moments. I feel like we've had some here or there, like some tweets, some things here and there that have gone really well. So I'm not necessarily like in the belief that it's like a one-hit wonder type of thing. I just think that over time we've consistently had some things go really well. And I feel like we're kind of waiting on that one next big thing. But I will say, I think it's going to come in the form of an idea of some sort within the company. So I don't necessarily know what it is, but I have a really big feeling, and this just could be my feeling, but I know that George and I are really going to try with our podcast specifically to push this thing about brothers and being live a lot more and being out there. I think if we can get, a big traction of like siblings listening into our podcast or get involvement with like brothers and siblings, if we can get that message out there, like go onto our podcast, it's anchor.fm/pod that, and you can leave a message if you have a sibling, things like that. I think the more we can get people into that trend and incorporate the siblings and as we always say, if you don't have siblings, it could be your cousins or something, whatever, right? If you don't have siblings, we don't discriminate. But I think a moment like that or like a trend that we start, I think could be something that's really big for the company.
Absolutely, guys. And you've already been huge leaders in just the consistency on the content side. And I see it on a daily basis, the different ideas you bring and the different podcast segments and different guests. And it's that experimentation that we came back to. And I completely agree with you, Sammy, in that in terms of the brand, the family connections of sports and how sports teams and fanhood ties people together is not only a really powerful part of our human experience. And that's just not even as Americans, that's globally, whether it's soccer, it doesn't matter what sport you follow or what team or athlete you're a fan of. That's something that's really inherent to people's social connectivity with others. And I think that's a big piece that as you keep experimenting with your content and with the formats and platforms, and you weave in those themes of your personal brand that are authentic to you and George and what the company was built on, I think and truly do believe that those things will really take off into something unique that inspires sports fans to keep following you and to be dedicated to the Sports on Tap, because it's just not a part of anyone else's brand, at least that we've seen so far. So you guys have everything prepped to build that and really excited to see where it goes. So
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for joining us for an incredible episode. I mean, we've touched on so much today, from a personal branding aspect to social media to consistency, resiliency. You really are the American story, and as is your family when it comes to finding your way as entrepreneurs, pivoting, staying tough, navigating the challenges that you face, and ultimately building something really special. And so excited to see where Sports on Tap continues in the future.
I appreciate that. And I think you got to see a moment of our,
I'm glad you're part of our journey too, John.
Oh, I am too. Here. It's been so much fun, guys. Honestly, working with you last year has been a blast, and we're really excited to continue doing some great stuff with you in Chicago.
And you got to see a moment of our authenticity today, where I told George, "God damn, How about next time mute when you drink water? And guess what he did? That was a brother comment right there. The next time we got the mute. That was a prime example of our authenticity. And at the end of the episode,
Be frank, I actually didn't even know. Well, that used to be. Let me be frank. I didn't know it was so loud. Is it a loud noise?
It's pretty loud.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I won't do that again. It's good to
Spoken
know.
like true brothers. Spoken like true brothers. I love it, guys. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. For those at home, definitely check out the Sports on Tap at thesportsontap.com. Follow George and Sami on Twitter at George on Tap and at Sami on Tap. Follow our local channel at Sports on Tap Chicago, and looking forward to continuing building a great sports media company with you guys.
Thanks a lot.
So let me know what you think of today's episode. Comment on our social media or send us an email at founderstrustpodcast@markettrust.io. Now go get building.